They uninvited me from the anniversary trip I paid for. But I had a different itinerary in mind. My late husband, Robert, and I had a secret. It was a small, stubborn dream we kept alive through decades of raising children, paying off a mortgage, and living a sensible life. That dream had a name: Paris. We would sit at our kitchen table on cold winter nights, a map of the city spread between us, and trace the paths we would one day walk. We would see the Mona Lisa, he'd say, and you would wear a red scarf. We would eat bread that was still warm from the oven and drink wine in the middle of the afternoon just because we could. But life, as it often does, had other plans. We never made it to Paris together. After he passed, I found an envelope he had left for me in his desk drawer. Inside was a passbook for a savings account I never knew existed and a short, simple note. It said, "This is your adventure fund, my Clara May. It's not for a leaky roof or a new furnace. It's for a plane ticket. For a new beginning when you're ready for one." For 5 years, that passbook sat untouched, a sacred promise I didn't know how to keep. An adventure for one felt too much like a betrayal of a dream built for two. But then my daughter Jessica's 20th wedding anniversary began to approach. And a new idea, a beautiful idea, started to bloom in my heart. What if I didn't have to take the adventure alone? What if I could take the dream we had built and share it, transforming it into a new memory for the next generation? I could use Robert's Adventure Fund, not for a new beginning for me, but for a perfect, unforgettable celebration for them, for all of us. I pictured it so clearly, the four of us. Jessica, her husband Tom, my granddaughter Sophie, and me standing under the sparkling lights of the Eiffel Tower. I presented the gift to them on a Sunday evening. I had made a special dinner, and I gave them a small box. Inside wasn't an object, but a printed itinerary, a week in Paris for the Peterson family. They were stunned, then overjoyed. Jessica cried. Tom, a man who rarely showed emotion, hugged me tightly, but it was Sophie's reaction that I will always remember. Her eyes, so like my Robert's, grew wide with wonder. "Really, Grandma," she whispered, "us in Paris." It was in that moment I knew I had made the right choice. My husband's gift would not just be spent, it would be multiplied, shared, lived. It's a beautiful feeling, isn't it? To pour your heart into creating a perfect moment for the people you love. As I sit here telling my story, I find myself wondering where in the world you might be listening from. It would bring me such joy if you would leave a comment below and let me know where my story has traveled to. It creates such a wonderful sense of connection, knowing we are all part of this Granny Stories family. If you feel that connection, please consider subscribing to hear the rest of my journey. Of course, back then I saw no clouds on the horizon. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of happy planning. I became the lead researcher for our grand adventure. I bought guidebooks and circled cafes. I spent hours online reading reviews of small museums and mapping out walks along the Seine. Sophie would often join me, and we would dream together, picking out which pastries we would try first, which gardens we would sit in. Jessica and Tom were busy with work, they said, and they trusted my judgment completely. I took their distraction not as disinterest, but as a vote of confidence. I was the keeper of the dream, and I was building it for them, piece by perfect piece. I had the tickets printed and pinned to the corkboard in my kitchen, a neat little stack of promises. Our names, all four of them, sitting side by side. We were going to Paris. Together. I had never been more certain or more happy about anything in my life. The final week before the trip was a symphony of joyful, last-minute tasks. I packed my largest suitcase and then unpacked and repacked it 3 times, just for the sheer pleasure of it. I laid out my outfits on the bed, imagining where I would wear each one. A simple blue dress for a walk through the Luxembourg Gardens, a comfortable pair of walking shoes for the long marbled halls of the Louvre, and of course, a beautiful deep red scarf I had been saving for years. Robert had always said I looked beautiful in red. I packed it carefully in tissue paper, a silent promise to him that our dream was finally coming true. I bought a small leather-bound journal for Sophie, a place for her to sketch and write about our adventure. The house was filled with the low, happy hum of anticipation. The change came on a Wednesday, just 4 days before our flight. Jessica called and asked if she and Tom could come over that evening to discuss some final details. Her voice had a strange, formal tone I couldn't quite place. I felt a flicker of unease, but I pushed it away. I assumed they just wanted to go over the itinerary one last time. I even baked a lemon drizzle cake, her favorite, and set the table with my good china teacups. They arrived just after 7. They didn't bring the children. That was the first sign that something was wrong. They sat at my kitchen table, the same table where we had planned our wonderful trip, but they didn't touch the cake. Tom stared at his hands while Jessica looked at me with an expression of practiced, deep concern. "Mom," she began, her voice soft and rehearsed. "Tom and I have been talking a lot and we're worried." I waited. The silence in the kitchen was suddenly heavy. "We're worried this trip might be too much for you," she continued. "Paris is a big city. There's so much walking the long flight. You've been a little tired lately. We would never forgive ourselves if something happened to you so far from home." Every word was coated in the sweet poison of concern. She was building a cage of love and worry around me, and I could feel the walls closing in. I tried to argue, to tell her that I was perfectly healthy, that my doctor had given his blessing, that my heart was stronger than it had been in years. But my words were like pebbles against the wall of their decision. The final killing blow came from Tom. He reached across the table and patted my hand, his touch condescendingly gentle. "Clara May," he said, and he only ever called me by my full name when he was about to be deeply patronizing. "This is our 20th anniversary. We were hoping for some time. You know, just for us. A second honeymoon of sorts." And there it was. The truth finally in all its ugly, selfish clarity. This was never a family trip. It was a romantic getaway that I was funding, and my presence had become an inconvenient excess piece of baggage. My dream of sharing Paris with them was just a story I had been telling myself. Their dream was a story that did not include me. They left soon after leaving the uneaten cake on the table. They left behind a silence so deep it felt like a wound. They had taken my dream, the one I had nurtured for decades, and then gifted to them with an open and loving heart, and they had carefully, politely cut me out of it. They took my money, but they had rejected my company. They thought they had left me with nothing but an empty house and the echo of their false concern. They had forgotten about my husband's last promise. They had forgotten about the adventure fund. And they had forgotten the kind of woman I was when my back was truly against the wall. That night, sleep was a stranger. I sat in the dark living room, the untouched lemon cake on the kitchen table, a pale monument to my foolishness. The house was quiet, but my mind was screaming. I replayed their words, the carefully chosen phrases of concern that were, in fact, weapons of dismissal. Too much for you, for your own good, just for us. They had taken my gift of love and meticulously edited me out of it, leaving only my money behind. I walked over to the corkboard in the kitchen and looked at the 4 plane tickets pinned there. A neat row of lies. My dream wasn't just deferred, it had been stolen, and I had willingly handed over the keys. The grief was a physical thing, a heavy weight in my chest. But as the hours of the night wore on, something else began to bubble up from beneath the pain. A slow, hot, and unfamiliar anger. I had spent my life being the sensible one, the quiet caregiver, the woman who smoothed over rough edges and kept the peace. I had accepted the shrinking of my own world as a natural part of aging, a necessary sacrifice for the comfort of my family. But this was not a sacrifice. This was an erasure, and I would not be erased. In the cold gray light just before dawn, I went to my husband's old desk. From the bottom drawer beneath a stack of his old photographs, I pulled out the envelope containing the passbook and his last note. I unfolded the paper, its creases soft as old linen, and read his words one more time. "This is your adventure fund, my Clara May. It's not for a leaky roof or a new furnace. It's for a plane ticket. For a new beginning when you're ready for one." And in that moment, I understood. Robert hadn't just left me money. He had left me permission. Permission to choose myself. He knew better than anyone the parts of me that had gone dormant over the years, the adventurous girl, the woman who dreamed of seeing the world. This wasn't just a betrayal by my daughter. It was a wake-up call from my husband. I was ready for a new beginning. As the sun rose, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a newfound steely resolve. I made the call to the travel agency. The young woman on the other end was cheerful and efficient. I did not cancel their tickets. That would have been too simple, too obvious an act of anger. My plan was more subtle. My revenge would not be a storm. It would be a slow, quiet change in the weather that they would never see coming. I used the debit card linked to Robert's adventure fund, and I booked a new ticket. 1 seat for a flight to Paris, a flight that departed 2 days before my family's. The transaction was smooth and impersonal, but it felt like the most significant declaration of my life. I had just purchased my own freedom. After I hung up the phone, a strange and wonderful calm settled over me. I began to pack, but not the large suitcase I had so joyfully filled before. I took out a small, smart carry-on bag, the one I used for weekend trips years ago. I was traveling light now. I was leaving the baggage of their expectations behind. I packed only what was essential. 2 simple dresses, a comfortable pair of walking shoes, a good book, and the red scarf. This time, as I folded it, I wasn't thinking of a family photograph. I was thinking of myself, a woman alone, walking through the streets of Paris, visible and unashamed. They were flying to Paris for a second honeymoon, a trip built on a foundation of my love and their lies. They had no idea that I was flying there first for a rebirth. My husband had left me a fund for a new beginning, and I was finally ready to make a withdrawal. The 2 days before my flight were a blur of quiet, secret activity. I moved through my house with the practiced calm of a woman who has lived through decades of small domestic crises. I confirmed my flight. I arranged for a taxi. I told my next-door neighbor I was visiting an old college friend for a week. The lies were small, but they felt like armor. On the morning of my departure, I walked out of my front door with a single small suitcase and a handbag. The house I was leaving behind was quiet and orderly. The woman leaving it was anything but. The flight itself was a long, suspended moment of peace. I sat by the window, a stranger in a metal tube in the sky, and for the first time in years, I felt completely anonymous. No one needed me to be a mother, a grandmother, or a widow. I was just a woman with a ticket. I watched the clouds drift by below and felt a profound sense of lightness, as if I had shed a skin I didn't even know I was wearing. Arriving at Charles de Gaulle Airport was like stepping into a roaring river. The sounds, the signs in a language I didn't speak, the sheer overwhelming number of people, it should have been terrifying. But it was exhilarating. I navigated the signs, found my luggage, and stood in the taxi line with a sense of calm I hadn't earned but felt all the same. The taxi ride into Paris was a dream made real. I saw the grand, beautiful buildings I had only ever seen in books, the bustling cafes, the impossibly chic Parisians. My heart, which had felt so bruised and heavy just days before, felt light and curious. My hotel was a small, charming place on a quiet side street in Le Marais, with a winding staircase and a sleepy cat in the lobby. My room was simple, but it had a small wrought iron balcony with a view of a classic Parisian rooftop, all chimneys and weathered slate. I stood on that balcony for a long time, just breathing. The air smelled of rain and bread and a city that had seen everything. I had made it. I was here. That first evening, I went for a walk with no destination. I let my feet lead me through the narrow, winding streets. I bought a warm crepe from a street vendor and ate it while leaning against a stone wall that was older than my entire country. I sat at a small round table outside a bistro, ordered a single glass of red wine, and watched the world go by. I was utterly alone, and for the first time in my life, I understood that being alone was not the same thing as being lonely. Back in my room that night, I knew it was time. I took out my phone, my heart beating a little faster. My rebellion would not be a loud declaration. It would be a quiet, elegant photograph. I didn't take a picture of my face. That felt too obvious, too needy. Instead, I poured a glass of wine and stood on my balcony. I held the glass up my fingers steady and took a photo of just my hand, the wine, and in the soft, focused background, the distant, unmistakable sparkle of the Eiffel Tower's nightly light show. I opened my social media page, a place I had not posted on in over 3 years. I uploaded the photo. And then I wrote a simple caption, just 3 words to new beginnings. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the post button. This was the moment of no return. Then I pressed it. The message was sent, a small digital flare sent up into the night. It's a strange and powerful feeling, isn't it? To take back your own story. To choose for yourself the one perfect picture the world gets to see. I put the phone down immediately after. I didn't wait to see the reactions. The act itself was the destination. I didn't know what would happen when my family, now just 1 day away from their own departure, saw the photo. I didn't know if it would be met with anger, confusion, or even concern. But as I stood on my balcony looking out at the city of my husband's dreams, I realized for the first time in a very long time that I truly didn't care. I wasn't writing the story for them anymore. I was writing it for me. The morning after my first post, I woke with a sense of quiet purpose. I deliberately did not check my phone. The world of their reactions, their anger, their confusion could wait. Today, Paris was mine, and I had an appointment I had been waiting a lifetime to keep. I went to the Louvre. I walked through its grand arches alone, a small, anonymous woman in a sea of strangers, and I felt more myself than I had in years. I didn't rush. I wandered, letting my eyes lead me. I spent an hour in a single gallery, just looking at the brushstrokes on a Dutch still life, the way the artist had captured the light on a silver pitcher. I finally found my way to the base of the grand staircase and looked up. There she was, the winged victory of Samothrace. I had seen her in books, of course, but the pictures had not prepared me for the sheer, breathtaking power of her. Headless, armless, battered by centuries, and yet she was still striding forward, her stone wings catching an invisible wind forever on the verge of flight. I stood there for a long time, not as a tourist, but as a pilgrim. I saw not a broken statue, but a symbol of survival. A testament to the fact that you can lose pieces of yourself and still be magnificent. I had a leisurely lunch at a small cafe in the museum courtyard. I ordered a slice of quiche and a glass of white wine, and I wrote in the journal Sophie had given me. I wrote about the colors of the paintings, about the feeling of standing before the winged victory. I did not write a single word about my family. Later that afternoon, feeling bold, I made my second post. It was a photo of my own sensible walking shoes on the ancient marble floor right at the base of that magnificent statue. The caption was simple, walking with old friends. Only then, sitting in the sun with my empty wine glass, did I allow myself to turn on my phone's data. It came alive with a furious series of buzzes. 10 missed calls. 15 text messages. They had seen the posts. The messages had progressed through a predictable cycle. First, confusion from Jessica Mom. What is this? Is this an old photo? Then disbelief from Tom, Clara. May, your sister, said she saw a picture of you in Paris. Please call us. And finally, pure, unfiltered anger from Jessica. Are you actually in Paris? What are you trying to do? Call me now. I read their frantic words with a strange sense of calm detachment. It was like watching a storm from behind a thick, soundproof window. Their panic was theirs, not mine. I silenced the notifications, put the phone back in my purse, and ordered another glass of wine. That evening, I wandered into an old church near the river. An organist was practicing, and the vast stone building was filled with a deep, resonant music that seemed to shake the very air. I sat in a wooden pew in the back, letting the music wash over me. I thought about my daughter 3,000 miles away, furious because her romantic getaway was being haunted by her mother's quiet, joyful independence. It's a powerful lesson, learning to distinguish between the noise of someone's anger and the quiet, clear voice of someone's love. The first you can ignore. The second is everything. When I returned to my hotel, the barrage of messages had continued. But now, there was a new one, buried amongst the demands and accusations. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the message was unmistakable. It was from Sophie. Grandma Mom is going crazy. She saw your pictures. Are you really here in Paris? It's okay if you are. It's actually kind of awesome. Can I see you? Please. I ignored the frantic demands of my daughter and the angry texts of her husband. But I replied to Sophie. I sent her the name of a small cafe on Ile Saint-Louis, a place known for its hot chocolate, far from the tourist-filled hotel where her parents were staying. I wrote, tomorrow, 3 o'clock, my treat. My grand trip for 4 had been canceled, but a secret, truthful meeting for 2 was now on the books. The next day, I dressed for my meeting with Sophie with more care than I had taken in years. I put on my best simple black dress, and after a moment's hesitation, I took the red scarf from its tissue paper wrapping. As I tied it around my neck, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I wasn't the woman who had packed this scarf with naive, familial hope. I was someone else now, someone quieter but stronger. I was wearing this scarf for Robert's dream, yes, but more than that, I was wearing it for me. I arrived at the cafe on Ile Saint-Louis a half-hour early. It was a wonderful, cozy little place that smelled of dark chocolate and old wood. I chose a small table in the back, a place where we could talk without being overheard. I ordered 2 cups of their famous hot chocolate, so one would be waiting for her, and I sat. The minutes stretched into an eternity. For a brief, panicked moment, I wondered if she would come if her parents had forbidden it. Then the small bell above the door tinkled, and she was there. She looked small and nervous, a little secret agent on a mission of the heart, her eyes scanning the room. When she saw me, her face broke into a smile so full of pure, uncomplicated love that it took my breath away. She rushed over, and we hugged a fierce, conspiratorial embrace right there among the clinking cups and quiet chatter of strangers. In that hug, I felt the last of the winter's chill leave my bones. We talked for 2 hours. I narrated the entire story of our conversation, and she filled in the parts I couldn't have known. She told me how angry she had been when her mother had announced I wasn't coming, how she knew the excuse of my health was a lie. She said, her voice full of a wisdom far beyond her 15 years. They wanted a perfect romantic vacation, Grandma, but they left out the best part of the family. Her words were the greatest gift, the most profound validation I could have ever received. In turn, I told her the story of her grandfather and me, of our silly, stubborn dream of Paris, and I told her about his final gift to me, the Adventure Fund. I wanted her to know that my journey was not an act of spite, but an act of love, a fulfillment of a promise. I gave her the small, leather-bound journal I had brought for her. As she ran her fingers over the cover, her eyes shone. For your own adventures, I told her. Fill it with stories. Your stories. She had to leave then to get back before her parents grew suspicious. We hugged again at the door, a quick, heartfelt goodbye. After she left, I remained at the table nursing my cold, hot chocolate. I felt a profound sense of peace. The anger I had felt toward Jessica and Tom had faded, replaced by a sad, clear-eyed pity. They were so busy chasing a perfect picture that they had missed the beautiful, imperfect reality. The visit with Sophie was like a compass reorienting my entire journey. I was no longer running from a painful past in America. My trip was no longer about proving a point to them. Paris had served its purpose. It had given me back to myself, and it had given me this perfect stolen afternoon with my granddaughter. I took out a map of Europe I had picked up earlier, and for the first time, I didn't see a list of impossible destinations. I saw a list of places I would go next. My adventure was just beginning. The morning after my meeting with Sophie, I woke up a different woman. The purpose of my trip was no longer a secret rebellion against a painful past in America. It was now a joyful journey toward a future with my granddaughter. Paris had served its purpose. It had been the battlefield where I had reclaimed my own soul. Now it was time to see the rest of the world, that I had been told was not for me. I went to the Gare de Lyon that morning, the grand old train station, and I bought a single ticket. Not for home, for Florence. The weeks that followed were a beautiful, sun-drenched blur. I saw Michelangelo's David in Florence and wept not at its beauty, but at its resilience. I ate gelato on a sun-warmed piazza in Rome and listened to the city's chaotic, ancient symphony. I learned to navigate the train schedules of Italy with a confidence I didn't know I possessed. I was no longer a tourist. I was a traveler. My adventure was no longer about Paris. Paris had just been the beginning. My connection with Sophie became my anchor. We didn't talk every day, but we exchanged photos and short, loving messages. She sent me a picture of a drawing she had made of the Winged Victory. I sent her a photo of a particularly beautiful plate of pasta. Through our phones across an ocean, we were building our own private bridge. Eventually, an email arrived from Jessica. It was long and stilted, full of awkward apologies and explanations that no longer mattered. She said they had made a mistake, that they missed me, that they hoped I would come home soon. I read it, and I felt a distant, quiet sadness for the woman. She was a woman so afraid of life's complications that she would edit her own mother out of it. I did not reply right away. I knew that any response I gave would have to be on my own terms, in my own time. The power dynamic had shifted. I was no longer waiting by the phone. My journey ended as I knew it must, back where it began, in Paris. I booked one final night before my flight home. I stayed in the same small hotel, but I was not the same woman who had arrived weeks before. On my last afternoon, I sat at a small outdoor cafe, the same kind of place Robert and I had always dreamed about. I ordered a coffee and took out a single beautiful postcard I had bought that morning. It was a classic, iconic image of the Eiffel Tower at dusk. I turned it over, and I began to write. I did not write to my son or my daughter. I did not write to Sophie. I wrote to myself. I addressed it to Clara May Peterson at my own address back home. The pen moved steadily in my hand. Dearest me, it began. You made it. You saw the paintings, you drank the wine, you walked the ancient streets. You were brave even when your knees ached and your heart was heavy. You learned that being alone is not a punishment, but a privilege. You learned that your worth is not measured by your usefulness to others, but by the quiet, steady hum of your own soul. The girl who dreamed of Paris with her husband is still here. She was just waiting for you to come and find her. Welcome back. I signed it with love from the woman you were always meant to be. I walked to a bright yellow postbox on the corner of the street and slid the postcard inside. I knew it would arrive home long after I did a message from my new self to my old one. A reminder. A promise. My trip was over, but my adventure, the true adventure of living my own life on my own terms, had just begun. Thank you for traveling with me on this journey. My adventure was a reminder that our own stories are the most important ones we'll ever live. If my journey has stirred a feeling or a memory within you, I would be so honored if you would share your thoughts or a piece of your own story in the comments below. The wisdom we share with each other is the greatest gift of all. If you know someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late for their own adventure, please feel free to share this story with them. And to become part of this wonderful family of storytellers, please consider subscribing to Granny Stories. It has been a true gift to share my journey with you.